Hello, hi everyone. Just a quick check before we begin. If you can hear us and see us, let us know in the chat if you can hear us and you can see us, and we'll begin with the webinar. Just checking. Still didn't see any. Okay, everything okay. I see the comments. Perfect. So I'm Jan. I'm one of the founders of Applover, and thank you for joining our webinar today, which is a part of a series that Applover holds online for the community for a while now. For those of you who are here for the first time, a few words about us. Applover is a digital consultancy agency with over 150 employees that builds mobile and web applications for our clients, mainly from the health tech and fintech industry. We were named one of the fastest growing tech companies in Europe by the prestigious ranking FT1000, Financial Times 1000, and the general DNA of ours is working on technologies for the most dynamic and recognizable startups on the domestic market and worldwide. Today, we'll cover a very interesting topic, which is how can UX research help you build products that customers really want? I think that's something that's trending right now, especially in the recent months. And our presenters, the finest of the finest, Jakub Mitka, the designer from Applover, and Marcin Gawroński, who is our business analyst lead. And before we begin, please remember that you can obviously ask the questions in the chat, and I will be reading them after the presentation in order not to interrupt the presentation itself. But don't worry, they will be asked for sure. Okay, so without any further ado, Marcin, Kuba, the floor is yours.
Yes, okay. So hello everyone. Thank you, Jan, for your introduction. Okay, so let's start with the presentation. As Jan said, today's topic will be UX research. We will talk about how we can use it to help building better products that our customers really want, and also how can we gain better revenue from them, so we can create a better business value. Also, Marcin will talk about that later. Okay, so let's start with the agenda for today's webinar. So first of all, I'm going to talk about what actually is UX research. Some of you might be familiar with this term already. I'm going to talk about the context, and then we will see some example. I will also show you when should we actually conduct UX research, why is it so important, why we should base our decision on facts and data rather than our assumptions. Then we will talk about methods that are involved in the UX research term, because there is so many of them and it's sometimes hard to pick the one that would suit our project the most. So I will try to make you familiar with different problems, different questions that you might have during your development process, and we will try to see what research activities can you use to solve those problems. And then Marcin will take over and he will talk about the business gains from the UX research. What's the return of investments on it, and why is it so high? And we will show you and talk about an example case study, and then we will conclude the presentation, and there will also be a time to answer your questions. Okay, so I think we can start now with the presentation. So actually, what UX research actually is. Let me start first with the context. You've probably heard about the user-centered design approach. Currently, I believe is one of the most common ways of designing digital products. But despite that, I think, we believe that it's still often forgotten how important is the role of users themselves in the design process. We sometimes say that we are doing our process according to the user-centered design approach, but it's not really the case, because we are not really taking into the consideration our users, and we will show you in the presentation how we can actually do that to build better products. And why is that the case? Why we tend to forget about the importance of the research? Well, customer and market requirements mean that right now everyone wants to deliver their project as quickly as possible. So in situations like that, conducting UX research might seem like allocating resources on UX research might seem like not the most reasonable. I think sometimes when you look at the design process, it seems like UX research is something that is the easiest to sacrifice because we simply don't see the return of investment on that one. And of course, what we see is that it will definitely extend the process and make it more expensive, which are the things that we want to avoid. But we will talk about why that's not the case and why we can benefit highly from that. Yeah, and now let's be more specific about the topic. Basically, what you said, what UX research is. I would say is all the activities that you do to understand your users, understand their behaviors, their needs and preferences, so that you can build products that will really suit them. And the ultimate goal is obviously to enhance the overall user experience and ensure that the products and services that we offer to our users meet their expectations and requirements. Um, and this is, I mean, how can we know the expectation and requirements? So basically, UX research is definitely one of the way of getting to know them, and it's something that's really important to understand our users and understand those requirements so that we can build better products. And UX research involves various research methods and techniques. You probably heard about a lot of them. It involves methods like interviews, usability testing, data analysis, and it's all done to create this user-centered experience that are efficient, enjoyable, and satisfying, so that we set our priorities right during our project, and we create something that is we create basically a value for our users. And I really like this quote that you can see on the right hand side of the presentation. It was said once by Ralph Speff, who was a CEO of Jaguar Land Rover, so also someone who was involved in the design process many times. He once said that if you think design is expensive, then you should look at the cost of bad design. And I believe it really says it all about how big the return of investments is for UX and also UX research, since you not only provide a solution that your users like to use and spend more money on, but you also decrease the chances of developing something that will need many correction, and as a result, you will waste more resources. Okay, but why is it so important? We don't, as designers, are product people, as stakeholders of a project, we don't really want to base our design decisions on the assumptions and biases that we might have, and those biases exist because they are based on our experience, they are based on our knowledge, they are, of course, also based on how we use similar solutions ourselves. So if we are using some online tool, and we tend to believe that other people will also use it in a similar way, but that's not always the case. In fact, those assumptions can be and often are wrong. Um, and why is that? Well, of course, we all know that internet users are very diverse. We differ in basic characteristics like age, gender, place of residence or origin. We also have to consider factors like education, profession, and interest, because they also influence how we use the internet. For example, if you are designing some product for people that are young and familiar with new technology, definitely we can take that into consideration and make something that will be more usable for them, because they know certain patterns that other target audience would not know. So essentially what we want to do is just design basing our decisions on facts and analysis rather than those biases and assumptions. And why, to basically design this great experience for our target group, we must check, first of all, who our users are, how they deal with the problem as of now, how they use the internet, and most importantly, what problems they face, to just, get to know the scope of the whole problem so that we can focus on the right things during the design process. And by doing UX research, we can also get better at prioritizing the development process. Since if we know the most important issues, if we know the most important problems of our users, and if we specify the most important goal of them that our product should solve, we are more aware of what should be done in the first place, so that we can provide the most value for our users instantly after the release, and then just build on that. And of course, many things can go wrong if you don't follow, if you don't conduct any kind of research. It might turn out that the experience that we offer to our users is insufficient. So they will probably get to know with our application or our website. They will install it, but they find out that even if it solves their problem, it's very insufficient for them. So either they don't like the design, it may be very confusing for them to use it. They just simply might know that the competition will do it faster for them and provide maybe some additional features that we don't offer. So in this case, they will just simply go and choose the product of a competition. And also in the worst case scenario, we can do something that is simply just unnecessary for them. So they just won't be bothered by a product, and they will instantly forget about it because we didn't identify the problems right, and we didn't solve any of the actual problems that users had with our product. And of course, if we fail like that, we will know about this because we will definitely have some data that we gather through different analytics tools. We'll know that our conversion is not that high as we would probably imagined. And at this point, what we did was basically test our solution on production. So after release, which is not the best way, and it's a little bit too late, because then we end up in a situation when we have to correct those issues. And if they are really big, in fact, the whole development process will have to be repeated, because we still must find the right solution. So basically, we still have to go through the design process once again. We still have to test it, and let's not forget the time for the development process. So this is something that we really want to avoid, and UX research helps us with that. Okay, let's now just look into one case that I think highlights this problem really well. You probably all remember Windows 8. It was released by Microsoft in 2012. And as you probably remember, it didn't really receive good reviews by users. And why is that? I believe it's because Microsoft didn't have or based their decisions on assumptions and intuition rather than a proper research. And of course, this new system introduced a radical departure from the familiar start menu, for example, and it was a new desktop interface, and it was replaced with a more touch-centric, tile-based interface, known also as Metro UI. And the users were not happy about it because they found tasks that were once straightforward, like, for example, shutting down the computer or finding installed programs, and those tasks became unnecessarily complex in the new interface. Even the start menu, the absence of it, frustrated many users. And this is all because Microsoft had wrong assumption that though this one-size-fits-all approach will be enough and will also do a great job on a traditional desktop screen. They thought that if users are familiar with those kinds of tile-based interfaces, for example, from their mobile devices, they also it will also be intuitive basically on the desktop screen. and it turned out not to be a case exactly. And of course, Microsoft had to address those issues. They did an update of Windows 8.1, and they brought back some traditional interface element that made the whole system a little bit more intuitive. But you can see that this is the additional work that they had to do to redesign those features, and probably something that could have been avoided if they had done a proper research before that. Okay, now let's talk about when you should actually conduct your research. And for me, maybe there's not one answer for this. I believe that there's much to learn basically at every stage of the project, but the advice would be that if your project has already started, and you hadn't done any research activities as of now, you should probably do it right now, because there's still time to fix some errors. There's still time to validate if your assumptions are right and if you are doing something that will actually provide value for your users. But the truth is that the most user research should be done as early in the project as possible, because this way it will have the most influence. Um, because if you simply understand the problem well, if you define the goals of the project well, because you know and expect the requirements of your users, it will shape the project better, and you will know what to focus on first, and you will know what to do to provide the best value for your users. And of course, we don't want to forget about the supplementary research that you can do later on in the project, especially testing, and that you can do to validate your ideas. That's also a personal take for me, which I think is really important from this presentation. If you are really tight on your resources, like budget or time, at least try to do some usability testing sessions, because you really can go wrong with that one. And after doing them, you really will be sure if what you are proposing to users really makes sense and they understand how to use it, and it's intuitive for them. But if you find any errors at this stage, you will still have time to correct them, because it's still a design phase, and it's still before the development, so you won't waste as much resources as it would be if you hadn't done this usability testing. Now you can see on this graph there's those different UX research methods. You can see that some of them are more quantitative, and then answer the questions of how much and how many. Basically, you can get interesting data from them, interesting numbers. At the other side, you have more qualitative research methods that answer the questions of why and how, tell you a little bit more about the motivation of your respondents. And on the other axis, you have more attitudinal methods that tell you what people say. And the opposite, you have the behavioral methods that explain to you what people actually do, because those things can be different in real life. Okay. But sometimes to pick the right method for you cannot be so straightforward. So we will now try to focus on different phases of the project and different problems that you might have, different things that you might want to know during your project, so that we can focus on what methods should you use for those kind of questions to find the best solutions for your problem. Okay, so let's start with the discovery phase. This is a very first stage of your project, when you actually find out the most important things. You find out does your project even make sense? And for example, what you want to do at this point is to understand the whole context of your problem, understand how your users solve the problem as of now. And for that, you can conduct some interviews, get some people one-on-one, talk with them, ask them how they deal with this problem now. what are their motivation, what are their emotions, what are their other problems. You can also conduct some focus groups if you feel like the problem is not too complex and you can fit more people into one session. You can also do some field studies, so when you observe people in the environment when they actually deal with this problem or use your product if you are redesigning something. Another big thing is to understand your users, understand your target audience. And for that, also surveys, interviews might be helpful. You might do some surveys to gather some basic characteristics of your users. And if you want to know them better and understand their behaviors and motivations more, you can also conduct some interviews and focus groups. If you're already working on a product that has been going for some time and you have some on-site data, you can also use some analytic tools, um, for example, to find out what devices your users use, because that's also something that might be a great insight for you. You really, what would be also reasonable is to get to know your competition, and competition analysis is something that can really help you with that. You can see and analyze all the advantages and disadvantages of your competition to see what's something that you shouldn't probably change, because it's something that is already been dealt with pretty well. But also you can find some pain points and find things or areas where you can optimize the process to get an advantage and provide even better value for your customers. And then there is the exploration phase, also really important one when you understand the problem and the design scope. What's really important at this stage is understanding the goal, because you want to know the motivations of your users and what problems they face. Of course, interviews and focus group can also be great for that. And as you probably saw, those interviews and focus groups are mentioned more than once here. And what I mean by that is, of course, the best thing that you can do is to imagine what problems you might face later on the project, gather all the questions that you might want to get answered, and then conduct some interview sessions with your target audience to get all of those answers at once. Sometimes you want to test a hypothesis just to see, just not to base your decisions or your assumptions. And for that, also interviews might be good. Also, surveys can be can get you interesting insights. Reasonable thing is to understand the process, because you would probably like to know what should be the perfect process for your product. And for that, I would highly recommend doing some workshops with your users or with your stakeholders. For example, do some journey mapping where you basically go through the whole user journey, see where are the pain points, where are the things that you could optimize. If you want to find out about the scope of your projects, get to know what features are actually necessary for the product to succeed, you can also provide some workshops and, for example, do story mapping when you just break down all the features that should be there in your product, break down all the flows that should be there to find the ideal process, and even break it to the point when you know what UI elements there should be on your solution. And also, of course, interviews and focus groups can be good for that. Okay, testing phase is also, of course, also really important as every stage of the project. At this point, you really making sure if the solution that you provided works. So the most important thing is probably reviewing the usability, because you want to know if your users can actually deal with your solution, if they understand what happens. And for that, the perfect solution is to conduct some usability testing. I've mentioned them before. You just basically conduct those interviews with your target audience, show them your prototype, and make them perform some tasks on it to see if they will understand how to do them. And if you detect any errors at this stage, you will still have time to correct them because, as I said before, it's still a design phase, so there's still time to make corrections. Sometimes what you want to do is to decide between versions because, for example, you want to create a new version of your website and see if it has any effect on the conversion. For that, A/B testing would be perfect because what it involves is you basically just display one version of your website to some users and the rest of them sees the other version, and you can give it some time, a couple of weeks, and then you see which version generated more conversion, and then base your decision on that. Sometimes understanding users' attention is really important for you, and for that you can use some methods like eye tracking, mouse tracking, but it's worth noting that these methods are a little bit more complex, and they would probably require having an equipment for you, for example, for eye tracking, because you have to have a camera to track the eyes of your users. You would probably want to have them also conduct such tests in real life. And for mouse tracking, you probably would also need some software, but those are actually more sophisticated methods that you would probably use for more complex research, but it's worth mentioning that they are there. And if you are interested in similar data, you can always see your analytics maybe through some heat maps or something. You could actually get some similar insights. And the last stage is analyzing. It's really important because you then monitor the usage of your product and correct issues if you notice any of them. For example, you might notice that users drop off at some point of your flow, and you would like to know when and where. And for that, you can, for example, use some analytics tools like Google Analytics or Hotjar that will provide you some screen recordings, heat maps, and or some other on-site data that will help you see where the problem really is. Sometimes what you want to do is just to review the opinions of your users to see if you are doing a great job with your solution. You can do some surveys, for example, the Net Promoter Score, to see if you are actually providing a great experience for your users and if they will be able to promote it to other people. But also interviews and usability testings are perfectly fine for that. Sometimes what you just want to do is to review the problems because, for example, you might have noticed many people reaching out to the customer service because, for example, the something is too complex for them or they cannot find some relevant information. So sometimes just simply doing this frequently asked questions review will help you with noticing those problems and will help you prioritize what you should focus on next. Okay, and now we will switch to Marcin, and he will talk about the business benefits of the UX research. So, stage is yours, Marcin.
Yeah, thanks, Kuba. Thanks, Kuba, for great insights. Like Kuba said, I would try to talk a little bit more about the UX research from more of the business perspective and why it actually makes sense to invest our resources into such processes. So first of all, it usually might be quite tempting, especially when we have a senior team of product designers, where we have business stakeholders that claim that understand the users, they know what problems they're trying to solve, and already have some initial assumptions about the product, to actually omit the stage of this process, especially when we are working within a strict timelines and a strict budget, where we want to find some places where we can cast costs. This part is usually the first one that we think about in terms of sacrificing something within a project. However, such thinking can be quite bad for the project and the business in general, because even though the benefits for UX research are not visible from the very beginning, we need to understand that this is rather a long-term game, and at the end, those benefits that would come from the UX research process would actually translate to the higher financial performance of our product. And on the other hand, the risks that are connected to the lack of such process will also be reflected in a lower financial performance of our project. So some risks that we are actually trying to avoid and are present in most of software projects, if we actually don't perform such a research, are, for example, a higher customer support bill. So if we have users that are not really satisfied with our product, and we're not actually solving some of their problems, or the users don't know how to actually use our application, they usually turn to the support of the application. And the worse UX and UI design of our application, the more such inquiries for support would have, which in general would generate additional cost for our business. Next, if our application doesn't actually solve any particular problem that is viable for our users after actually using our application will abandon it, and it's very costly for us, because probably we as a business we generate a lot of costs for actually for acquisition of a customer that go to marketing or other channels, and those efforts that we put into that are usually lost because our product is not very well fitted for our users. Additionally, even though we might actually solve some real problems for our users, our design might be too complex to use, and it just causes that like I said, our users are stuck and they need to go to support, and in general they are frustrated while using our tool. And if they are frustrated, they usually tend to say that say their opinion either by mouth to mouth to people they know about our application, or they just post some bad reviews in some forums, which also leads to a worse reputation of our business and our application in general. And lastly, and most importantly, the lack of research may actually lead to a lower chance of finding a product market fit of our product. So in general, our business will not be a good one. So this is something that everyone wants to try to generate, and without such research, it's definitely much more difficult. And on the other hand, what we actually can gain performing the UX research. So first of all, like I said, we will improve the user satisfaction, users that will actually use our products, that will solving their problems, and if the application is easy to use, they will be more likely to come back and generally be more satisfied with the product, which also generates some additional benefits in the form, for example, of positive reviews. Additionally, we increase our efficiency in the project. So during the workshop phase, during the research, we already solving some development problems that that would be needed to be solved either way. But because we're trying to solve it at the very beginning, and we are already gaining some knowledge about them, it's much easier to solve them in the future during the development, which drastically, like I said, increase our efficiency, but also reduces our costs in general, the costs that are connected with the development, but also costs connected with the churn of our customers. Furthermore, I think it's very, very important that thanks to that we can improve our process of decision making, because we are changing our decisions that are based on some assumptions of our stakeholders and some guts of the team within the project. We're changing that for the more informed decision making. That's the decisions that are made based on the data that we actually collected from potential users that will potentially use the product, and this in general leads to better and more efficient and effective decisions about our product. And in general, if we of course manage to create an application that everyone likes and our customers are satisfied with it, our brand reputation is also improved. Here I want to share some statistics about the research that were made about the processes within the software development. So first of all, one research says that actually 40 to 50% of work that is done in software projects is actually avoidable rework, right? So this is something that if we had some information, some additional information beforehand, we'd actually act differently in terms of the development of our software. So this is things related to how users actually go through our applications, or some additional features that don't actually solving the real problems of our users. So this is the part that could be avoided thanks to the proper research phase beforehand. And actually, some research also says that each dollar that is put into the design phase at the very end translates to $100 in gains. Rather, it is reflected in the reduce of costs or additional profits that the proper application generates. So I think this gives some good overview why this process are really worth to go, especially at the beginning. But of course, we need to remember that, as with every part of the work, we can make some mistakes, and we can do some errors that actually lead to some bad research in general. So these are some things that we probably need to focus to avoid during the processes. So first of all, if we set some unclear research objectives, so the question why we actually want to perform the research, what do we want to know from the users? If we state those questions poorly, we don't get answers that actually translate to the better designs or better solutions in our product. So this is very important to properly define the research objectives beforehand. And next, of course, like Kuba already mentioned a few research methods, it is very important to also choose the proper method for the proper stage of the process. Because, for example, we don't want to go into user story mapping and starting to map our application if we don't really know what kind of problems trying to solve, what kind of problems our users may face, and who our users are. So this is also an important thing to remember while starting the research. Then, of course, when we perform some research on some participants and some potential users, it is very crucial to remember that we need to recruit proper participants. So actually, people that might be our potential users and our representative group of our target group of users of our application. So, for example, if you're trying to develop an application that is aimed for, let's say, elderly people, we don't want to go and conduct a research on, let's say, students and some young people, because those participants would not tell us the real problems of our potential users, so elderly people in this case. And next, this is also quite problematic, especially in terms of business stakeholders. So conducting biased user research. So usually when we start developing the product, we have some concept and we have some assumptions. And usually the business stakeholders sometimes aim to and try to actually positively test those assumptions. So it's very important during co-research that we don't actually lead our participants into the answers that we want to hear. So, for example, if we are asking about some functionalities in our app, we shouldn't ask what do you like about this functionality, because this already creates positive thoughts about some functionality, but rather we would try to ask more generally, what do you think about such functionality? And lastly, this is also very important, we shouldn't always stick to the opinion of our users in terms of what actually that they want to build. So we shouldn't ask about the actual solutions, but we should ask our users about problems that they face, and then based on that, probably we'd have the material to work on and try to solve in a way that is possible through technology. Okay, I think that's most for me. So Kuba, let's go back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Martin, for those really interesting business insights. And now let's talk about the case study that we prepared for you. This is the case study that actually has a name. It was called the 300 million button. And it has a name because I think it's a very popular case study among designers that want to convince the stakeholders that okay, we should probably do some proper UX research, because just simply in this case, the numbers are really high, and we will talk about this in a second. So basically, the story was originally written by Jared Spool in one of his articles. He's a very well-known expert of the whole usability issue, or he has a lot of experience, many years of experience designing digital product. And basically, the problem was that, to give you some context, there was this major retail company, and they had their e-commerce site. And they noticed that a lot of people drop off after they add the products to the cart. So basically, they are choosing the products that they want to buy, but later on they not end up buying them. And they've hired a design agency to find out what's going on and to find the solution for this. The design agency decided to conduct some research on this topic. They did some usability testing sessions with actual customers to see how they deal with the whole purchasing process in a real environment. And they discovered one big problem that resulted in drops of the users. So basically, they noticed that after you add your products to the cart, you basically have one button with the option to register. And then you are welcomed with this simple registration form, nothing too complex, your typical login or registration form. But the problem was actually where this form was placed. So during those interview sessions, the the researchers found out that people were actually really irritated by this form, because there was no way to avoid it, right? So you actually had to create an account to proceed with your purchase. And they noticed that, or people told them that they just simply wanted to buy some stuff. They didn't want to create any bond, any special relationship with the company. They just simply wanted to buy the stuff that they've added to their cart. And also the designers did the analysis of the retailer's database, and they discovered that nearly half of all the customers had multiple registrations in the system. So that basically meant that even the ones that created the account, they just simply forgot the credentials or didn't even remember that they have the account, and next time they were buying something, they would still create another account. And some users or some users had as many as 10 different accounts. So we can see that the intentions for this form were probably reasonable, because the stakeholders of the project wanted to increase the number of registration, because it's always a great thing to brag about on your company presentation. And also, the designers wanted to make the process actually easier, because they thought that, okay, maybe one time the person will have to fill in all those credentials and create an account, but then we will remember other things that they need to fill in during the purchasing process, like your address, your personal details. And if you have an account, you will not need to do this once again. So actually, the intention were good, because the form was intended to make shopping easier, but it turned out to just basically prevent sales instead. So what they did was basically they changed the button from register to continue. So basically, they discarded the whole one step of the process. So users finally didn't have to create an account to do some purchase. They could do it as guests. And of course, there was still option for those who had an account to log in or create an account. So that those needs were also covered by the solution. And by doing that, they saw that the number of customers actually purchasing went up by 45%, which converted to extra $15 million extra revenue in the first month. That summed up to be $300 million extra revenue in the first year. So you can see, obviously, in this case, numbers are really high, because as I said, it was a major company. But I love how you can see how such small change resulted in such a dramatic increase of the revenue for this company. And that's why I think it's a really great example of why you should sometimes invest even some resources to doing some research. Because imagine if they knew about this problem earlier, and if this was not the case since it was designed basically and delivered, how much money could be saved by this company, right? So sometimes even such small changes like that one can result in very different in dramatic increases of your revenue. Of course, you probably shouldn't expect it to be that much, because as I said, it was a major company. But still, you probably know that even slight differences in your conversion rates can mean much more money for your company. Okay, so I think we can now conclude the presentation and go through the most important insights once again. So I hope we've all saw that investing in UX research means that there will be more chances for us and that the product will succeed among our target group. And of course, despite doing those activities, doing research activities, of course, we need some resources for that. Maybe it seems like it will extend our project. I think that Marcin also showed that it can create more revenue in the long run. And yeah, I've tried to also cover different research methods. I hope that it will be easier for you next time you encounter some problems that I've mentioned during your project, and it will be easier for you to find out the perfect research methodology that you can use for that to solve your problems. And also to bring back the personal take from me, which I think is very important from this presentation. Yeah, once again, if you are really low on your resources, try and leave to conduct some usability testing sessions, because you will always find some things to improve, and you will definitely minimize chances that you've missed some big problems, and that you've missed something that could have been easily avoided if you've done these interviews. And even if you don't have resources to do those sessions with your target audience, even doing them with your colleagues or family will be better than doing nothing. So I think it's something that we can really do, not wasting much money and still see a great value at the end of it. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope we've all learned something new today, and let's now go through your questions.
Right, I'll be reading them more over one by one. Exactly, it's already here. So Roman is saying that you mentioned previously that some companies experience minimal improvement or see little difference even after conducting their own UX research. Could you elaborate on this? And is it due to the lack of competences among the UX researchers, or are these instances where business have initially fine-tuned their product to a high degree and might not require additional UX research until later stages?
Okay, so yeah, I think I know what you are referring to, Roman. Maybe okay, that's probably not what I meant. Maybe I've expressed myself wrong here, because what I meant was that sometimes it seems like we won't have any actual benefits of conducting this UX research. And sometimes it's really hard to convince our stakeholders to do this, because as I said, it might seem like something that it's easiest to sacrifice, especially if we have some experienced designers on our team, right? So we have this we assume that if we have experienced designers, they will probably know how to solve those problems and how to develop something that will be great for our users. But sometimes that's not the case. But what I meant is that sometimes it's difficult to convince our stakeholders to do this. And I believe that Marcin also showed us what the benefits of investing in UX research can be. But yeah, definitely, I think sometimes you might not see any results. And I think also that's something that Marcin covered, because he was talking about what can go wrong during your research and how can you mess up basically during the research. If you, for example, set wrong objectives, if you recruit wrong people. What I will also say is sometimes you have designers that do not specialize if doing research, right? Because design is also a spectrum that you can specialize in many different areas. Sometimes you have on your team people that don't actually know how to do some proper research. I mean, there is a whole you can always hire people that are expert in doing UX research. That's also a role that we've seen getting more attention recently. So yeah, I think in general I meant that it's hard to convince our stakeholders, but definitely also it can be done in a wrong way if we don't focus on our goals too much.
All right. There is a second question from Natalia about the tools. So are there
Okay.
any online tools that help you conduct UX research, and which one can you recommend?
Okay, yeah, I believe there are definitely many of those online tools that can help you conduct your research. I think what's the biggest problem sometimes to find respondents. So I feel there's a lot of websites that can help you with that. You have websites like usertesting.com. You have websites like respondents.com that help you gather people from your target audience, because sometimes it might be not easy for you. Then they help you contact with those people. They sometimes even can schedule the interviews. So yeah, definitely there are some tools that you can use, of course, and there are many tools to record your sessions, record your video sessions. So it's actually helpful when you are conducting your interviews. There are many tools also for gathering your insights and grouping them, collecting them to make the analysis easier for you. I don't remember actually the specific ones. If you need, please tell us in the chat, and we will try to find some and paste them in the chat. But I personally always use Excel for that, and it was perfectly fine. But there are definitely some tools that make it even easier.
Right. I think Marta also shared some insights on the tools she's using, and we're back to the questions. Julia is asking, what do you think about remote testing?
Yeah, okay, that's a really interesting topic for me. Pretty much all the research activities that I've talked about during this webinar can be done remotely. Not all of them, because, for example, you have field studies when it's better to actually go in person and see how users deal with some problems. But of course, right now we have resources to do some remote testing, remote research. We can, for example, in terms of testing, we can always share our prototypes with our respondents, and they can share their screen so that we can see what they're doing. They can share their video so that we also see their facial expression, the emotion. Are they frustrated with our solution, or are they happy with it? So definitely, maybe there are some additional benefits if you are doing some tests in real life. Maybe you will see even some more reactions that will be interesting for you from your respondents. But definitely you will be perfectly fine doing most of those research activities, especially testing online.
All right. Next question from Marta, I think. Where do you recruit respondents from? Yeah, this one. And where do you collect your data from? Excel, Word, Word Research?
Oh yeah, so this is actually something that I mentioned before. Yeah, sometimes might be hard to recruit some people. I think the great way is always to try and target those people across your group of users. If you are working on a product that is already ongoing, you can always try to send some emails to people from specific groups, and try to maybe find ones that will be happy to take part in those interviews. But also, I mentioned the online services that can offer you help and assistance in finding some respondents. As I said, sometimes might be hard to find people from your target group. What I did was many times research some Facebook groups, for example. You can always find some interesting people that will be happy to take part in your research. So there's definitely many ways to do that. And when it comes when you speak about collecting data, Yeah, I personally always used Excel. I know there are different tools that might be even better for that. Of course, they are paid, so that's something you have to remember. But if you are interested, we can definitely look into that and provide some answers for you later. But there are definitely some tools to do that also.
All right. And the next one, what do you think about guerrilla testing with your colleagues?
Okay, this one I'm not actually sure. Can we maybe investigate this topic more and go back to you? Do you mean like testing? I definitely heard this before in the past, but do you mean just testing your solutions with colleagues? Is this like what I said, simple usability testing sessions with your colleagues?
Yeah, since we're waiting for Katarina to respond, because probably this one needs some clarification. Yes, yes, you have it on chat, Kuba.
Oh yeah. Well, of course, as I said, it would be perfect to provide those kind of to conduct those kind of research activities with your target audience, because is something that. Oh yeah, is it enough to test your decision? Yeah, definitely, it's the best way to do those kind of research activities with your actual target audience, but even if you don't have those resources, you can always try and show your solutions for your to your colleagues, I believe, because ultimately all the flows that we are designing and the products are to some extent similar to each other. And there's this rule that if your parents know how to deal with this problem, you would probably be we are probably doing a great job. So, of course, it's not perfect because, especially if your colleagues are, engaged in the product, in the project, they might know more things that a typical user would not know. So, if you do that, at least you should probably try to find a person that is the least engaged in the project and has the least experience with it, so that the results will be more natural. But definitely, if you don't have any other options, I think even testing with your colleagues will be better than doing nothing. So.
All right, I see that we have an hour already on the clock. So I don't see any more questions for now. As I see that, thank you both for your answers and for the presentation. For the viewers that are still with us, thank you very much for joining. That's the first thing. And the second, obviously, the recordings are available on our YouTube channel. And hopefully, we'll see each other on our next session pretty soon. And to be announced, the date will be announced also soon. So thank you again. Have a great day in the meantime.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.